What if I told you the person who was supposed to protect you could be the one who destroys your life? What if the person you trust most is hiding something dark right under your roof? Life, at 16, was supposed to be simple. School, friends, small victories, and challenges that felt minor in the grand scheme of things. But for me, that all changed one evening. And the worst part? It happened under my own roof, with the woman who had always been a figure of trust and security, my Aunt Gloria. My parents had always been kind-hearted people. We weren't wealthy, but we had what we needed, and that was enough. My mom worked at a hospital, and my dad was a taxi driver. A modest life, but it was my life. I was the only son, and my world revolved around the simple joys of being a teenager, hanging out with friends, playing video games, and coming home to a warm meal. But that normal life, the one that felt like it would never change, shifted the day Aunt Gloria came to stay with us. She wasn't just any aunt. She was my mother's younger sister, in her early 30s, single, and never quite settled. I had always admired her. She was fun, outgoing, and had this magnetic personality that made everyone love her. When she came to stay with us after her breakup, my mom was eager to help her get back on her feet. We were family, after all, and family helps each other through tough times. At first, it was the little things, nothing that stood out, but enough to make me uncomfortable in ways I couldn't explain. She'd hug me a little too long, or laugh a little too hard at my jokes. I brushed it off as nothing. She was just being her usual charming self. But then it began to feel different. The first time it happened, I was sitting on the couch, playing a game on my phone, when Aunt Gloria came and sat beside me. I didn't think much of it at first. She always loved to chat and catch up on life. But this time, as she sat down, I felt her eyes on me. I shifted uncomfortably, trying to ignore it. She leaned in a bit too close, and I felt her hand brush against mine. I froze. A shiver ran down my spine, but I told myself it was just a weird coincidence. She was family, nothing more. But then the touches started happening more frequently. A hand on my shoulder as she passed by, an arm around me in what seemed like an innocent gesture. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I couldn't pinpoint it, but I felt trapped. This wasn't just the aunt I had grown up with anymore. There was something else in her gaze, something that didn't belong. One night, I found myself alone at home with Aunt Gloria. My parents had gone out for a family event, leaving me with her. I'd been told to stay inside and study, but I felt restless. She called me into the living room, her voice soft and inviting. I hesitated for a moment, but I went anyway. When I walked into the room, she was sitting on the couch, a glass of wine in her hand. Her eyes softened when she saw me, and she patted the seat next to her. "Come, sit, I just want to talk," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I walked over and sat down, trying to ignore the knot forming in my stomach. The room felt too quiet, too still. The light seemed dimmer than usual. She leaned closer, and I felt her hand brush against my knee. My heart began to race, but I stayed frozen in place. "Why are you so tense, my dear?" she asked, her voice low. "You can trust me, you know that, right?" I wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. I tried to smile, but it felt forced, strained. It felt wrong. And then, without warning, she leaned in closer, her breath on my ear. "You know, I've always cared about you, right?" The moment she spoke those words, I felt a chill wash over me. A feeling of dread sank into my stomach. This wasn't just family affection anymore. It was something else. Before I could react, she grabbed my face, pulling me into a kiss. I jerked back, pushing her away as my heart hammered in my chest. "Aunt Gloria, what are you doing?" My voice cracked with fear, but she only smiled, her expression changing to something darker, almost predatory. Her grip tightened, and in that moment, I realized how much power she had over me. She was family, someone I trusted, but now I was trapped. Trapped in a nightmare that had no escape. "You're mine now," she whispered. The words echoed in my head as if they were carved into my mind. and you'll never tell anyone." I froze, unable to move, unable to speak. My world was collapsing around me, and I didn't know how to stop it. The next morning, everything seemed normal again. My parents were back. Aunt Gloria was acting like nothing had happened. I couldn't shake the feeling of dread, though. My body felt different, heavy. But how could I tell anyone? Who would believe me? Aunt Gloria was beloved by everyone. I woke up the next morning feeling like I hadn't slept at all. The events of the night before were playing over and over in my mind. I couldn't shake the image of Aunt Gloria's face, the way she smiled at me like nothing had happened. It felt like I was going crazy. Was I imagining things? Had I overreacted? I tried to ignore it. I had no choice. Aunt Gloria was still here, and my parents were acting like everything was normal. Mom and Dad didn't notice the subtle shift, or maybe they didn't want to. Aunt Gloria was the life of the house, always with a joke, a laugh, or a way to make everything seem okay. But I couldn't stop the feeling that something had broken, something inside me that I couldn't fix. The day dragged on, and I tried to get back to my usual routine. School was an escape, where I could focus on something other than the suffocating reality at home. But even at school, I couldn't stop thinking about Aunt Gloria. Every time I saw her, it felt like she was watching me, waiting for me to slip up. The worst part was the quiet. When I was alone with her, everything felt heavier. Her presence felt like a weight on my chest, and I couldn't breathe without feeling like she was in my space, always too close. The whispers, the subtle touches, the way her eyes lingered a moment too long, all of it was driving me to the edge. That evening, after dinner, I retreated to my room, hoping to escape. I locked the door, though I knew it wouldn't stop her. Aunt Gloria had a way of getting what she wanted, and I couldn't outrun her anymore. The knock came later that night, just as I was starting to fall asleep. It was soft, gentle, but I knew who it was. My heart skipped a beat as I held my breath. I wanted to ignore it. I wanted to pretend it wasn't happening, but I knew that wouldn't make it go away. I got out of bed, trying to steady my hands as I reached for the door. "Come on, kid," Aunt Gloria's voice called softly from the other side. "I just want to talk." I swallowed hard. I couldn't stay quiet forever. But I couldn't face her either. Every part of me screamed to tell her to go away, to finally speak the truth. But fear held me in place. Fear of what might happen next. Fear of the consequences. I opened the door a crack, just enough to see her. She was standing there, a smile on her face, her eyes too calm, too knowing. Her presence filled the space like a cloud, suffocating me before I even had a chance to speak. "You're not sleeping, are you?" she asked, her voice too sweet. She reached out and touched my arm, her fingers lingering just a little too long. "You've been acting strange lately." I pulled back instinctively, my body reacting before my mind could catch up. "I'm fine," I said, the words coming out strained, too forced. She laughed softly, stepping closer. "You don't have to lie to me," she said, her voice lowering. "I know you're struggling, but you don't have to be alone in this. We can help each other." I froze. I couldn't understand what she was saying, what she meant. Every time I tried to back away, she pulled me back in, closer to her, closer to the fear that was becoming a constant part of my life. "I don't need your help," I whispered, though I knew it wasn't true. I did need help. I needed someone to understand, someone to believe me. But I couldn't tell her that. Not now. Her smile widened, but there was something cold in it. "Oh, you'll change your mind," she said, as though she already knew everything I was thinking. "Just wait. I'm not going anywhere." Before I could say another word, she turned and left, her footsteps fading down the hallway. I stood there in the silence, my heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I wanted was to wake up from this nightmare, to go back to the way things were. But I knew it wouldn't happen. I knew the truth now. Aunt Gloria wasn't the same woman who'd come to stay with us. She wasn't the person I'd thought she was. And now I was trapped. trapped in a situation where the people I trusted the most were blind to what was happening right in front of them. I wanted to tell my mom, to scream at her, to make her see what was happening. But what if she didn't believe me? What if she chose Gloria over me? Like I was just imagining things. The fear of being rejected by my own mother kept me silent, kept me locked in this private hell, alone with my thoughts. The days continued like that, one after another. The fear and anxiety settled in my bones, making every moment with Aunt Gloria unbearable. I tried to act normal, tried to smile when she was around, but it felt like I was wearing a mask that was slowly suffocating me. I knew I couldn't keep this up forever, but I also knew that telling someone meant risking everything, and the question that haunted me every night was this: would anyone believe me, or would I lose everything trying to expose the truth? The days blurred together. Each one felt like a repeat of the last, each one a little harder to bear. Every time Aunt Gloria entered the room, I felt like I was shrinking, like she was a shadow I couldn't escape. It wasn't just the whispers or the strange touches anymore. It was the way she looked at me, the way she spoke to me, like she knew something I didn't. I was suffocating under her gaze. I tried to keep up appearances, to act like everything was normal. I still went to school, still hung out with my friends when I could, but when I came home, the weight of the silence crushed me. I couldn't focus on my homework. I couldn't even sit still without feeling her presence looming over me. It was a Friday afternoon when I finally broke. I had just returned home from school, my backpack slung over one shoulder, my mind racing with thoughts I couldn't control. As I stepped through the door, Aunt Gloria was there, sitting in the living room like she was waiting for me. I didn't want to talk to her, didn't want to face her, but I had no choice. She looked up at me with that same unsettling smile. "Hey, how was school today?" she asked, her voice casual, like she hadn't been slowly dismantling me for days. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. It was like every word she spoke made me feel smaller. "It was fine," I mumbled, moving past her and heading for the stairs. I just wanted to lock myself in my room and pretend none of this was happening. "Come on," she called out, her voice laced with something I couldn't quite place. "We need to talk." I stopped in my tracks. There was no escape, no running. I turned around slowly, my eyes meeting hers, and I felt the panic start to rise in my throat. I didn't want to face her. I didn't want to hear her try to explain away the things she had done. But I had to. I couldn't stay quiet any longer. Reluctantly, I sat down across from her, my hands shaking as I tried to control my breath. "What's going on, Gloria?" I forced myself to ask. "Why are you doing this to me?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she studied me, her gaze so intense it felt like she could see right through me. "You don't get it, do you?" she said finally, her voice soft but firm. "You don't understand what's really going on." I blinked, confused. "What are you talking about?" She leaned forward slightly, her eyes narrowing, and for the first time, I saw something darker in them. "I've always been here for you," she said, her words slow and deliberate. "I've been looking out for you, and I've seen the way you've been avoiding me, acting like something's wrong. But I'm not the enemy here. I'm the one who's trying to help you." Her words made my stomach turn. I opened my mouth to say something, but nothing came out. What was I supposed to say? How could I explain to her that I was terrified, that every touch, every look, made me feel like I was losing myself? I stood up abruptly, my legs weak beneath me. "I can't do this," I whispered, my voice cracking. "I can't stay here anymore." "Where are you going?" Gloria asked, her voice low, almost a challenge. She was standing now, stepping closer to me. "You can't run from this, you know. You're not going to escape it." I felt the walls closing in. The air was thick with tension, and I could barely breathe. My hands were clammy, my heart racing. "I'm not running," I said, though I didn't know where I was going or what I was even saying. "I just can't stay here, not like this." Without thinking, I turned and ran up the stairs to my room, slamming the door behind me. I sank to the floor, my back against the wall, breathing heavily. My mind was a whirlwind of fear and confusion. What had just happened? Why was she doing this? And most importantly, what did I do to make her think this was okay? I couldn't stay silent any longer. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine when I was breaking inside. But who could I tell? Who would believe me? Aunt Gloria was family, the person who was supposed to protect me, not destroy me. She had my mother's love and my father's trust. How could I fight that? But the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. I had to tell someone. I couldn't live like this anymore. I knew I couldn't go to my mom. She adored Gloria, and I could already imagine what she'd say. But maybe Kofi, my best friend, would believe me. He had always been there for me. Maybe he was the one person who could help me make sense of this, who could help me break free from the fear that was suffocating me. I grabbed my phone and dialed his number. My hands were still shaking, but I pressed the call button anyway. He picked up after the second ring. "Hey, man." Kofi's voice was warm, familiar. "What's up?" I swallowed hard, trying to steady my voice. "Kofi, I need to talk. Can you come over?" The phone call with Kofi felt like a lifeline. As soon as I hung up, the weight in my chest didn't ease, but it did feel a little lighter. Kofi was coming over. He would understand. He had to. I didn't know what I was going to say when he arrived. How do you explain something like this? How do you tell your best friend that the person who was supposed to care for you, protect you, was the one hurting you? I sat in my room, my legs crossed, my head buried in my hands. The walls around me felt like they were closing in again. I could still hear Gloria's voice, the way she'd said those words. "You're not going to escape it." They echoed in my mind, drowning out all other thoughts. Was I imagining it all? Was I making a mountain out of a molehill? The rational part of me tried to convince myself that I was overreacting. She was my aunt. She wouldn't do something like that. But every time I remembered her hands on me, her whisper in my ear, the way she had looked at me with something cold in her eyes, the doubt crept in again. I knew I wasn't imagining it. I just didn't want to accept it. A knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. My heart skipped a beat, and I quickly stood up. "Come in," I called, my voice barely above a whisper. Kofi stepped inside, his usual confident smile replaced by a look of concern. He closed the door behind him softly and walked over to where I was sitting on the bed. He didn't say anything at first, just sat down next to me, waiting. I could feel the weight of his silence, the unspoken question hanging in the air. "What's going on, man?" Kofi finally asked, his voice steady but filled with worry. "You don't look like yourself. You've been distant. You're not the same." I exhaled slowly, trying to find the words. I wanted to explain everything, but I was terrified. What if he didn't believe me? What if I told him and he just thought I was being dramatic? "Kofi," I started, my voice shaking. "I don't know how to say this. I don't even know if I'm making it up in my head, but something's wrong. Something's been happening at home. With Aunt Gloria." His brow furrowed, confusion flashing in his eyes. "What do you mean? Is she okay?" I shook my head, the tears starting to well up in my eyes. "Number, I don't think she is. She's been doing things, Kofi, things that don't feel right. I don't know how to explain it." I could see the shock on his face as he processed my words, his expression turning to one of disbelief. "What kind of things?" I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to steady myself. I had to tell him. I couldn't keep this bottled up anymore, not after everything. She touches me. She looks at me in ways that I can't explain. At first I thought I was just being weird about it, but every time I'm around her I feel like I'm suffocating. And it gets worse every day. I'm scared, Kofi. I don't know what to do. The silence that followed felt like it stretched on forever. Kofi didn't speak immediately. He was processing what I had just said, and I could see the shock in his eyes turning into concern, then anger. But there was something else there too, something that looked like sympathy, as if he had seen this before. He reached out and placed a hand on my shoulder, his grip firm and comforting. "Dude, I believe you," he said quietly. "You're not imagining it. That's messed up. But you're not alone, all right? I'm here for you. We're gonna figure this out." The relief that flooded through me almost brought me to tears. All this time I had been drowning in my own fear, afraid to speak the truth, to say the words out loud. But now, Kofi was here, and for the first time I didn't feel so alone. He believed me. "I don't know what to do," I whispered, feeling hopeless again. "I can't just tell my mom. She's too close to Gloria. She'll never believe me. And what if no one believes me? What if they say I'm just making it up?" Kofi's expression softened, his voice gentle but firm. "We don't have to do it alone. We'll figure this out together. First, we need to make sure you're safe, and we'll get the help you need. You're not going through this by yourself, okay?" I nodded, feeling the weight on my chest ease slightly. It wasn't gone, not yet, but it felt manageable, now that someone else knew, now that someone else believed me. "I'm scared, Kofi," I admitted, my voice trembling. "What if it's too late? What if I'm already too far gone?" He shook his head, his eyes intense. "It's never too late. You can get out of this. You've already taken the first step by telling someone. That's the hardest part, man. And you did it. Now we're gonna make sure she doesn't get away with this. She can't do this to you, to anyone." I felt something shift in me. For the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of hope. Kofi was right. This wasn't over. I could still take control. I could fight back. The days that followed felt different, lighter, even though the weight of everything hadn't really changed. Kofi's presence made a huge difference. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel completely alone. I had someone I could talk to, someone who understood, someone who believed me. But the fear was still there, lurking in the back of my mind. Gloria wasn't going to just let me go. I could feel it. That weekend, I stayed at Kofi's house. It was supposed to be a break, a way to clear my head. But deep down, I knew it was because I couldn't be alone at home. I couldn't bear being in that house with Aunt Gloria and pretending like everything was fine. "Are you sure you're okay?" Kofi asked the moment we got to his house. His mom greeted me warmly, but he could tell I wasn't really there, not in the way I needed to be. "Yeah, I'm just tired," I lied. "School's been a lot." He didn't buy it, but he didn't push. Instead, we just played video games like we used to. It felt normal. And for a few hours, it almost felt like nothing was wrong. But that night, when it was time for bed, everything came rushing back. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how much longer I could keep this secret, this weight, inside me. The next morning, Kofi suggested we do something, anything to get my mind off things. He took me to the local mall, something simple, but it gave me the space to breathe, to think. As we were walking through the food court, he turned to me, his expression serious. "Deb, you need to tell someone who can help. I know you're scared, but you can't keep going like this. You don't deserve to live in fear." I looked around the crowded food court, feeling the anxiety crawl up my spine again. "I don't know, man. What if it makes everything worse? What if they just tell me I'm wrong?" "You can't think like that," Kofi replied firmly. "You're not wrong, and if you're scared to talk to your mom, we can go to someone else, a counselor, the police, anyone who'll listen. But you have to do something." I felt the weight of his words sink in. He was right. I couldn't keep living like this. But what if I was making it worse for everyone else? What if I was ruining the family, turning everything upside down? "Okay," I said quietly, the decision weighing heavy on me. "I'll tell my mom." Kofi gave me a nod of approval. "Good. You've got this. I'll be with you." I tried to convince myself that telling her was the right thing to do, but deep down, I feared what would happen when I finally told her. What if she didn't believe me? What if she chose Gloria over me? The fear was suffocating, but I couldn't keep living like this. I had to take the first step. The next day, I gathered all my courage. My heart pounded in my chest as I walked into the living room where my mom was sitting on the couch. She was reading a magazine like she always did in the afternoons. I took a deep breath, my palms sweating. "Mom," I started, my voice shaky. "Can we talk?" She looked up at me with a smile, putting the magazine down. "Of course, sweetheart. What's on your mind?" I hesitated, the words feeling like rocks lodged in my throat. "It's about Aunt Gloria." Her smile faded slightly, a concerned look crossing her face. "What about her?" I swallowed hard. I had to say it. I couldn't keep hiding. "She's been acting weird. She's been touching me, saying things that make me uncomfortable. And I don't know what to do, Mom. I'm scared." My mother's face shifted instantly, her expression hardening. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice tense. "Gloria? My sister?" I nodded, the tears starting to well up in my eyes. "Yes, Mom. She's been doing things, and I don't know how to stop it." She stood up abruptly, shaking her head. "No, no. This is ridiculous. Gloria would never do something like that. She's been nothing but kind to you. Maybe you're just overreacting." The words hit me like a slap. "I'm not overreacting," I shouted before I could stop myself. "I swear she's been hurting me. Please believe me." My mother took a step back, her face flushed with anger. "This is insane, David! I can't believe you're saying this about my sister. You're just making things up." I felt the ground beneath me shift, like everything I thought I knew was slipping away. My own mother, the one person who was supposed to protect me, was rejecting me. She was choosing Gloria over me. "I'm not lying, Mom," I whispered, my voice breaking. "She's been hurting me. You have to believe me." But it was too late. Her eyes were cold now, and she stepped away from me, shaking her head in disbelief. "I don't want to hear it anymore. You're out of line." I wanted to scream, to break down, but I couldn't. The world felt like it was crashing around me. I had trusted my mom, believed that no matter what happened, she would be there for me. But in that moment, she wasn't. She couldn't see what was right in front of her. I spent the rest of that day in my room, staring blankly at the walls. My mom's words kept ringing in my ears. "You're out of line. You're just making things up." The rejection hit me harder than anything Gloria had done. I had expected her to be the one to turn against me, but not my own mother. How could she dismiss me so easily? The hours dragged on, the loneliness settling in like a weight on my chest. My thoughts were a blur of confusion and pain. I had told the truth, but it felt like no one was listening. It was as if my voice had been swallowed up by the very people I trusted most. Kofi had called several times, but I didn't pick up. I didn't know how to explain to him what had just happened. I didn't know how to face him, knowing that the person who was supposed to protect me had just shut me down. I stayed up late that night, the silence in the house louder than ever. My mom was downstairs, pretending like everything was normal, just like Aunt Gloria had. I could hear their voices, low, muffled, like they were conspiring together. It felt like I was the outsider now, like I didn't belong. I had hoped that my mom would take my side, but instead, it felt like she was just siding with Gloria. The worst part was, I didn't know how to make her see the truth. Around midnight, I heard the familiar soft knock at my door. My heart skipped, and for a moment, I thought it was Kofi coming to check on me. But when I opened the door, it wasn't Kofi standing there. It was Gloria. I froze, panic rising in my chest. What did she want now? The last thing I needed was another conversation with her. But there she was, standing in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice soft but commanding. I wanted to slam the door in her face. I wanted to scream at her, tell her to leave me alone. But instead, I stood there, silent. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to confront her, tell her that I wasn't going to be her victim anymore. But another part of me feared what would happen if I did. I was already so alone. Would saying something finally push everyone away for good? "I just want to explain," she continued, stepping forward. "You don't understand what's going on, David. I'm doing this because I care about you. I've always cared about you." Her words hit me like a slap, each one more hollow than the last. How could she say that? How could she claim to care about me after everything she had done? I don't want to hear it, I said, my voice barely a whisper. You've done enough. She ignored my words, stepping closer. You're confused, I know, but I'm the only one who really understands you. Your mom doesn't get it. She's never really been there for you like I have. But I'm here for you, David. I always will be. Her words were a twisted version of the truth, designed to make me feel like I needed her, like she was the only one who cared. But I knew better now. She wasn't the person I thought she was. She was the one who had broken my trust, who had made me feel like I was nothing. I don't want your help, I said, my voice stronger now. I wasn't backing down. I couldn't. I don't want anything from you. Gloria's expression shifted. The smile that had once been warm and inviting turned cold, calculating. You don't get to decide what you want, David, she said, her tone harsh now. You're mine, and you'll never be able to escape me. No one will believe you. Her words cut through me like a knife. I had always feared this moment, the moment she would finally reveal her true nature. She had control, and she knew it. But I wasn't going to let her have it. Not anymore. You're wrong, I said, my voice filled with a quiet fury. I'm going to tell someone. I don't care if no one believes me. I'm not letting you control me anymore. For the first time, Gloria's calm demeanor cracked. Her eyes flared with anger, and for a moment I thought she might lash out. But then, just as quickly, the anger faded, replaced by a twisted smile. Go ahead, she said, her voice almost a whisper. Tell someone. It won't matter. No one will believe you. Not after all the things I've done for this family. You're just a scared little boy, and no one will ever believe the lies you tell. She turned to leave, but before she stepped out of the room, she stopped and looked back at me one last time. You've made a mistake, David, she said, her voice barely audible, and you'll regret it. I stood there, frozen, my heart pounding in my chest. The door clicked shut behind her, leaving me alone again. The weight of her words hung in the air, suffocating me. But something inside me had changed. I couldn't be afraid anymore. I didn't know what would happen next, but I was done being quiet. I was done pretending everything was okay. The truth would come out, no matter what, no matter... The next day felt like a blur. The conversation with Gloria last night had shaken me to my core, but it also pushed me in a direction I couldn't ignore anymore. I couldn't keep living in this suffocating silence. I had to find a way to tell the truth no matter the cost. But that didn't mean it was easy. It never was. I didn't sleep much, and the weight of her threat still lingered in my mind. No one will believe you. You're just a scared little boy. Her words twisted in my head, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't be scared anymore. I couldn't let her win. I tried to go through my day as usual, but the weight on my chest made it impossible to focus. Every time someone spoke to me, I could barely pay attention. My mom, Gloria, everything felt like a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. The normalcy of the world around me felt so out of place. It was like everyone else was living in their own bubble, while I was stuck in a nightmare I couldn't escape. At school, I felt like a ghost. My friends noticed the change, of course. Kofi, in particular, had been checking up on me, but every time I saw the concern in his eyes, it made me feel more exposed. He kept telling me to keep pushing, to keep moving forward, but I couldn't shake the feeling that things were only getting worse. During lunch, Kofi and I sat in the usual corner of the cafeteria, but I wasn't really there. I was lost in my thoughts, trying to figure out what to do next. Man, you look like you haven't slept in days, Kofi said, his voice soft but firm. You've got to tell someone, David. You can't keep holding this in. I sighed, leaning back in my chair. I know, Kofi, I know, I muttered. But the thought of it, of telling someone, felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. It was so final, so irreversible. I was scared of what would happen if I did. What if my mom still didn't believe me? What if she sided with Gloria again? And even worse, What if this ruined my life completely? "You're not alone, all right?" Kofi said, his voice cutting through my thoughts. "You've got me, and you've got other people who care. You don't have to carry this by yourself." His words were meant to reassure me, but they didn't make the fear go away. I wanted to believe him, but every step I took towards speaking the truth felt like I was losing everything I knew. Everything felt fragile. My relationship with my mom, my life at home, all of it was on the line. That evening after school, I found myself standing in front of the bathroom mirror, staring at my reflection. It was like I didn't even recognize the person I was becoming. The boy who had once been confident, carefree, was now drowning in fear. My eyes were tired, the dark circles under them proof of the sleepless nights that had become my reality. I took a deep breath, staring at myself. "You can do this," I whispered to my reflection. "You have to." The sound of footsteps outside my door brought me back to reality. I quickly wiped away the tears I hadn't realized had started to fall. I knew Gloria would be home soon. I couldn't bear another night of her being here, controlling everything. I had to act. I had to speak up. I grabbed my phone, heart racing as I scrolled through my contacts. Kofi was the first person I thought of. He'd been my support through all of this, but I needed more than that now. I needed to take the next step. "Call police." I typed it quickly, the words burning in my mind. I couldn't keep running from this. I stood there for a moment, staring at the screen. My finger hovered over the dial button. Could I really do this? Could I really go through with it? The door to my room creaked open and I froze. "David?" It was my mom's voice, soft but tense. "Can we talk?" I turned around slowly, my heart in my throat. I didn't want to face her, not after what had happened, but I knew I couldn't avoid her forever. This conversation had to happen. I put the phone down and walked toward her, my legs unsteady as I made my way to the door. She was standing there, her arms crossed, her face a mixture of concern and confusion. "Mom, My words caught in my throat. I didn't know how to say it, how to tell her what was happening, what Gloria had done to me. "I know this isn't easy, David," she said, her voice softer now. "But you've been distant. You haven't been yourself lately. What's going on? Please, talk to me." I opened my mouth, ready to finally say the words, but nothing came out. The fear was choking me. What if she didn't believe me? What if she turned on me like last time? "I can't," I whispered, shaking my head. "I'm too scared." She took a step forward, placing a hand on my shoulder. "David, you don't have to be scared. You're my son. I love you. Whatever it is, we'll work through it. Together." Her words should have comforted me, but they didn't. Not when I could feel Gloria's shadow hanging over me, her threat still echoing in my mind. The room felt colder the moment my mother stepped back, her words hanging in the air. "I don't believe you." It was the same rejection I had feared, but it stung more than I could have imagined. I had spent weeks trying to gather the courage to speak up, to tell someone what had been happening, only to have my own mother look at me with disbelief. I didn't know what to say. The words were still stuck in my throat, and the fear that had been haunting me for so long seemed to tighten its grip around my chest. I don't understand," my mom said, her voice trembling. "Why would Gloria do something like that? She's family. She's always been there for you." "Mom," I pleaded, my voice cracking, "you don't know her like I do. She's been—" But my mother cut me off, shaking her head slowly, as if she couldn't accept what I was telling her. "I can't listen to this anymore, David. You're making things up. I won't let you ruin this family." The words hit me like a slap. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. The betrayal in her eyes was too much to bear. How could she choose Gloria over me? How could she not see the pain I was in, the fear that had taken over my life? "I'm not making things up, Mom," I whispered, tears welling up in my eyes. "You have to believe me." She looked away, her gaze distant, her lips pressed tightly together. "I don't know what's gotten into you, but you're scaring me. I need you to stop." With that, she turned and walked out of the room, leaving me standing there, paralyzed by the weight of her words. My knees buckled, and I sank to the floor, my hands gripping my hair as the tears began to fall. This was worse than I had imagined. My mother had just chosen Gloria over me, and I had no idea how to fix it. The door creaked open, and I looked up to see Kofi standing there. His face was filled with concern, but I couldn't bring myself to speak. I didn't know how to explain to him that I had just lost the only person I thought would have my back. "David, what happened?" Kofi asked softly, stepping closer. "I told her," I muttered through the tears. "I told her the truth, and she didn't believe me." Kofi sat down next to me, his arm around my shoulders. "I'm sorry, man. I really thought she'd believe you." "I thought she would too," I replied, my voice barely audible. "But she didn't. She just rejected me. She's choosing Gloria." I wiped my face with the back of my hand, trying to steady my breathing. "What am I supposed to do now, Kofi? Where do I go from here?" Kofi was silent for a moment, his gaze fixed on the floor as he thought. "You've taken a huge step, David. You spoke up. That's not easy. You're not weak for feeling what you're feeling." I nodded, but his words didn't bring the comfort I needed. I had spoken up, but now what? Gloria was still out there, still manipulating my mother, still controlling the house. My fear wasn't just for myself anymore. It was for my family. The thought of losing everything, my home, my mom, my sense of safety, was too much to bear. "I can't stay here," I said suddenly, standing up. The walls of the room felt like they were closing in on me. "I can't stay in this house with her anymore." Kofi's eyes widened. "What are you talking about?" "I'm leaving," I said, the words coming out before I could think. "I can't live like this, not anymore." "David, wait," Kofi said, standing up quickly. "Don't make any decisions in a rush. You need to think this through." But my mind was made up. I had spent so long avoiding the truth, trying to protect myself and my family, but it hadn't worked. My mom didn't believe me, and now I was alone. The only option left was to escape. "I don't care," I said firmly, walking to the door. "I need to get away from here. I need to think." I left the house without a plan, without knowing where I was going or how I was going to survive. But for the first time in weeks, I felt a small sliver of freedom. The weight of Gloria's presence, the suffocating feeling of being trapped in a house with a monster, was gone. As I walked down the street, the cool evening air felt refreshing against my skin. But even in the freedom, there was a deep, aching loneliness that I couldn't shake. I had no home, no family who understood, and no one to turn to. But I wasn't giving up. Not now. I had already taken the hardest step, and no matter how alone I felt, I knew I couldn't go back to that life. I had to find a way forward. I had to speak my truth, no matter the cost. I didn't know where I was going when I walked out that door. I just knew I couldn't stay in that house, not with Gloria lurking around, not with my mother rejecting me. Every step I took down the street felt like a step away from everything I had ever known, and with each step I felt more lost. Kofi called me several times, but I ignored the calls. I wasn't ready to talk to anyone. I needed space, time to think, and to process everything that had happened. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions, anger, betrayal, confusion. But more than anything, I felt like I was standing on the edge of something, and I wasn't sure if I could climb back from it. I ended up at a park a few blocks away, sitting on a bench by myself, staring at the empty path in front of me. The sky was darkening, the quiet evening settling around me like a blanket. I hugged my arms around my body, trying to keep the chill from creeping in. But no matter how hard I tried to hold myself together, I felt like I was unraveling. The quiet was unbearable. My mind wouldn't stop racing. I thought about my mom, about her rejecting me, about Gloria and everything she had done. I thought about the things I had never said, the things I had kept buried inside for so long. I had told the truth, but it felt like my world was falling apart around me. How could I fix this? How could I make them see what was really happening? The sound of footsteps broke through my thoughts, and I looked up to see Kofi standing in front of me. He must have followed me after I left the house. "David," he said softly, his eyes filled with concern, You need to come back home. Your mom's worried sick about you." I shook my head, the weight of his words pushing me further into the darkness. "I can't go back, Kofi. Not after what happened. She doesn't believe me. She chose Gloria. I can't go back to that." Kofi sat down next to me, not saying anything at first. His silence wasn't judgment, it was understanding. I could tell he wasn't going to push me. He was just there, letting me work through the mess in my mind. "You don't have to go through this alone," he finally said. "I'm here for you, no matter what. But I think you should at least talk to someone, a counselor, the police, someone who can help you figure out what comes next." I looked down at my hands, trembling in my lap. I don't know if I can. What if they don't believe me either? What if I lose everything? What if I end up with nothing? "You won't lose everything, man. You'll find a way through this. But you can't keep running. You can't keep hiding from it. You've already been through so much." The truth in his words hit me hard. I had been running for so long, trying to protect myself from the pain, trying to protect my family from the truth. But running wasn't going to make it go away. It wasn't going to fix anything. I let out a long breath, the weight on my chest lifting just a little. "I don't know where to start," I admitted, my voice breaking. "But I can't keep living like this. I have to do something." Kofi nodded, his expression serious. "We'll figure it out, one step at a time. We'll go to the police or to a counselor. You don't have to do this alone. I'll be with you every step of the way." For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe Kofi was right. Maybe there was a way out of this. But I knew it wouldn't be easy. The road ahead was uncertain, and I didn't know what the consequences would be. But I couldn't keep hiding anymore. I had to face the truth, no matter how painful it was. "I'm scared, Kofi," I said quietly, my voice filled with vulnerability. "What if they don't believe me? What if I lose everything?" "You won't lose everything," Kofi said firmly. "You've got me. You've got people who care about you, and we're going to make sure you're safe. You've already started taking control of your life. The rest will follow." I took a deep breath, letting his words sink in. Maybe it wasn't too late. Maybe there was still a chance for me to take back control. But first, I had to face the hardest part, the truth. As we sat there in the fading light, I felt a small but steady resolve building inside me. The road ahead would be hard, but I wasn't going to walk it alone. I stood up, a little stronger than before. "All right, let's figure this out." Kofi smiled, giving me a supportive pat on the back. "That's the spirit. We'll take it one step at a time." And for the first time in a long while, I felt like I could breathe again. The days that followed felt like a blur. Kofi stayed by my side, helping me take the first steps toward facing the truth, even though neither of us knew exactly where it would lead. I spent most of my time trying to keep my mind busy, but every moment of silence felt like it was suffocating me. Gloria's threats still echoed in my mind, and every time I looked at my phone, I thought about calling my mom, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. She hadn't believed me before. What would be different this time? Kofi had convinced me to go to a counselor, someone who could help me process everything, someone who could give me a safe space to speak my truth. He was right. I couldn't do this alone. But sitting in the waiting room of the clinic, my hands shaking, I wasn't sure if I was ready for the truth to come crashing down on me. The counselor's office was sterile, with soft lighting and walls lined with bookshelves. It didn't feel like a place where I could open up and tell someone the horrors I had been living. But Kofi was right beside me, and that gave me a small sense of comfort. When the counselor called me in, I felt my stomach drop. I wasn't sure how to start, how to explain the depths of what I was feeling, how to share the secret that had been eating at me for so long. But as I sat in front of her, I realized that the hardest part wasn't the words. It was finally accepting that I couldn't carry this anymore. The counselor introduced herself as Dr. Grace. She had a calm, understanding voice, and her presence was gentle. "David, it's good that you came today," I know this might be hard, but I want you to know that you're in a safe place." I nodded, but my throat was tight, my hands clenched in my lap as I tried to steady my breath. "I don't even know where to start." Dr. Grace smiled reassuringly. "Just tell me what's been going on. There's no rush." And so, I began to speak. I told her about Aunt Gloria, about the subtle shifts in her behavior at first, the way she had touched me, the things she had said. I explained how I had tried to ignore it, convinced that I was overreacting. I told her about the night I finally realized I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. The fear, the panic, the overwhelming sense of betrayal when my mom had rejected me. As the words left my mouth, I could feel a weight lifting off my shoulders, but at the same time, the full gravity of what I was saying hit me. I was telling someone the truth, someone who wasn't going to dismiss me, someone who was actually listening. But even as I spoke, the fear of what would happen next lingered. What would my mom think when she found out? What if the truth didn't set me free, but destroyed everything I knew? Dr. Grace listened intently, never interrupting, her expression soft but serious. When I finished, I felt exhausted, as if I had just run a marathon. But there was a sense of relief, too. For the first time, someone believed me. For the first time, I wasn't carrying this burden alone. "Thank you for trusting me, David," Dr. Grace said quietly. "I know this isn't easy, but you've taken a very important step today." I nodded, my throat tight again. "What now?" I asked, unsure of what would come next. She leaned forward slightly, her voice gentle but firm. "Now, we take action. You don't have to go through this by yourself. We can help you get the support you need. We can also talk about legal options if you feel ready to take that step. But you don't have to make that decision right now. What's most important is that you're safe and that you're not alone in this." The weight that had been pressing down on me for so long felt a little lighter. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew that I wasn't walking through this darkness on my own anymore. The following day, I found myself sitting at home again. I hadn't gone back to my mom yet, but I had made a decision. I wasn't going to wait for her to come to me. I couldn't. I had already given up too much of myself to fear and silence. It was time to take control. Kofi had helped me find the courage to start the process of confronting my mom and talking to the authorities. I called the local police station and set up a time to speak with an officer. My hands were shaking as I dialed the number, and my stomach twisted with anxiety. But I knew this was the only way forward. When the time came, I found myself sitting in the small office at the police station. The officer who greeted me was kind but serious, asking all the right questions. He assured me that they would investigate the matter and that I was doing the right thing. As I left the police station, I couldn't help but feel the weight of what I had done. I had spoken out. I had taken the first real step toward facing my truth, and there was no going back. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was drowning. The following days felt like a blur, as if the world was moving faster than I could keep up with. After the police interview, everything started to feel real. I had taken the first step, but now I was faced with the consequences of what I had done. Kofi stayed close, checking on me constantly, offering his support, but I couldn't shake the anxiety. The fear was no longer just in the back of my mind. It was a constant companion, always present, always gnawing at me. I had finally spoken the truth, but the reality of what that meant was setting in. What would happen next? How would my family react? My mom hadn't spoken to me since the night I told her about Gloria. I could still hear her words ringing in my ears. "You're making things up. You're scaring me. This is ridiculous." It wasn't just her rejection that hurt. It was the silence. I knew she didn't believe me, but the distance between us felt like an unbridgeable chasm. I had always thought that no matter what happened, my mother would be there for me. Now I was doubting everything I thought I knew about her. Could I ever trust her again? I spent the next few days at Kofi's house, avoiding the emptiness of home. I couldn't face her, not yet. The fear of her turning her back on me again was too much. But even at Kofi's, I couldn't escape the guilt gnawing at me. I was supposed to be protecting my family. Now, I was the one tearing it apart. David, we need to talk, Kofi said one afternoon, pulling me aside as I was pacing around his room. You've been avoiding your mom, and I get it, but you can't keep running. You've done the hardest part. Now it's time to face her. You have to show her that you're strong, that you're not lying. I shook my head, the dread rising in my chest. I don't think I can. What if she still doesn't believe me? What if I'm just making things worse? Kofi put a hand on my shoulder. It's not going to be easy. It never is. But you can't let fear control you anymore. The truth is the truth, and you're not wrong. You can't let her silence you. His words hit me hard. I had already taken the first step by telling the police, by confronting the truth. But I had to face her too. I couldn't keep hiding from my mom. The thought of it terrified me, but Kofi was right. I had to stand tall, no matter what. That evening, I finally made the decision. I couldn't keep waiting for her to come to me. I had to be the one to take control, to speak the truth again, even if she didn't want to hear it. I walked back into the house, my heart hammering in my chest. The house felt different now, empty, like the walls were closing in on me. My mom was in the kitchen, as usual, preparing dinner. She didn't even look up when I entered. "Mom," I said, my voice shaky but determined, "we need to talk." She didn't say anything at first, just kept stirring the pot on the stove. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "I'm not lying, Mom. What I told you before, it's the truth. You have to believe me. Gloria's been hurting me, and I can't stay silent anymore." My mom froze. She didn't turn to face me, but I could tell she was listening. The silence between us felt like it stretched on forever. "I'm not making this up," I continued, my voice gaining strength. "I don't want to hurt anyone, but I can't keep living this lie. I need you to believe me, to see what's really happening. I need you to stand by me." She slowly turned to face me, her expression unreadable. For a moment, I thought she was going to deny it again, to throw me out of the house like she did before. But instead, her eyes softened just a little, and she stepped closer to me. "David," she whispered, her voice breaking, "I don't know what to believe anymore, but I can see that you're hurting. I don't know how I missed it before." My heart leaped in my chest. Was this it? Was she finally hearing me? "I'm sorry," she continued, her eyes filling with tears. "I didn't believe you. I was scared. But I'll support you now. I'll help you through this." I couldn't believe it. The weight in my chest, the crushing fear, started to lift. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. My mom was on my side, and I didn't have to fight this alone. "I don't know what's next," she said, wiping her eyes. "But I'm here. We'll figure this out. Together." I nodded, my own tears threatening to spill over. It wasn't over. Not yet. There was still so much to face, so much more to do. But for the first time, I felt like there was hope. Maybe we could rebuild. Maybe we could heal. But one thing was for sure. I had taken the hardest step. And now, no matter what happened, I would keep moving forward. The truth would set me free. The weeks that followed were a blur of emotions and decisions, each one more challenging than the last. After finally finding my mother's support, I thought things would start to get easier. But the road ahead wasn't simple. There were still so many things to face: the police investigation, my relationship with my mom, and the constant anxiety that came with the memories of what Gloria had done. But with each passing day, I felt like I was getting stronger. With my mom on my side, I was no longer walking this path alone. We began to rebuild our relationship, brick by brick, even though there was still a lot of hurt between us. My mom admitted that she had been blinded by her sister, and while it didn't erase the pain, it helped me understand why she had acted the way she did. She was in denial, trying to hold on to what she knew, but she was finally seeing the truth. Kofi never stopped supporting me. He was there every step of the way, offering a safe space for me to talk, to vent, to cry. I had never realized how much I needed him until that moment. He wasn't just my best friend, he was my rock. The police investigation was moving forward slowly but surely. Every time I had to speak with them, the reality of everything hit me like a wave. Talking about what had happened to me wasn't easy, but I knew it was necessary. I had to make sure that Gloria couldn't hurt anyone else. She had crossed a line that no family bond could justify, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. One afternoon, as I sat in the living room trying to focus on my homework, my mom sat down next to me. She had been quieter than usual lately, lost in her own thoughts as she processed everything that had happened. But today, she seemed different, more present, more engaged. "I've been thinking," she began, her voice soft but steady, "about what happened, about everything. And I want you to know that I'm sorry, David. I failed you. I should have believed you from the start." I didn't know how to respond. Hearing her admit that hurt, but at the same time, it also felt like a weight had been lifted. She was finally seeing things clearly, and that gave me hope for the future. "I know, Mom," I said quietly. "I didn't want you to believe me because I wanted to hurt anyone. I just wanted you to see the truth." She nodded, her eyes filled with tears. "I get that now, and I want to help you heal. We'll figure this out together. I won't let anyone hurt you again." It felt like a new beginning. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't easy. But with her support, I knew I could start to heal. It would take time. There was no magic solution to make everything okay, but I could face whatever came next with her by my side. Later that evening, we sat together at the kitchen table, eating dinner in silence. The air between us felt different, lighter, freer, though still thick with the remnants of the past. But as I looked at my mom, I could see that she was trying. She was willing to make things right, and that meant everything. As the weeks turned into months, things slowly began to improve. I started therapy, something Kofi had encouraged me to do from the start. It wasn't easy, but it helped. Each session was a step toward healing, and it gave me the tools to process everything that had happened. I began to learn how to manage the anger, the fear, and the pain that had been buried inside me for so long. Kofi was still there, always by my side, always ready to listen. My relationship with my mom slowly improved as well, though there were still days when the tension crept back in. But we were trying, we were rebuilding, and that was enough for now. One day, after another long therapy session, I was walking home when I passed a small park. I stopped, looking at the swings where I used to go when I was younger. The memories hit me hard. The boy who had been carefree, laughing with friends, not knowing the kind of pain life would throw his way. But that boy wasn't me anymore. I had faced my fear. I had spoken the truth. And no matter what happened from here on out, I knew that I had the strength to move forward. I wasn't the same boy who had run from the truth. I wasn't the same boy who had hidden in the shadows. I was stronger now. I was a survivor. And I would never let the past define me again.